but visually it's fairly obvious that there's an actual force on force struggle in the first two, and then the third one we don't see that as much. It's not as clear. That's why it looks so clean.
So, oh, actually, so I think an important point here is when Steve's son is gripping Steve, like like this, his elbows, yeah, his elbows are out. This is going to change, I think, the way that Steve is also going to have to respond to this, simply because, like, his obviously, like, his son is doing this. So the force is like, even though like it's going down, it's also kind of like out somewhat, if you know what I mean. Versus typically in this kind of practice, you hold them straight down with the locked elbows in order to give that basically downward diagonal force. You don't want any force going outwards because you're just trying to train that particular skill. This actually makes it more difficult. And as Hunter mentioned, I think somebody else on the forums mentioned, with the elbows bent, it prevents clean transmission or makes it more difficult to transmit that force cleanly into the other party.
Right, absolutely. And on top of that, you can see that he's not grasping Steve, right? He's just
Yep.
resting his hands on top of him, which totally changes the dynamics of this exercise.
Mm-hmm.
Most of Agete exercise kind of, I wouldn't say it's required, but most of them are done with the opposing person grasping the person
Yes.
fairly strongly, with the elbows kind of relatively locked out, not completely locked out, but pointing
Straight.
downwards. Yeah, fairly straight.
Well, and there was a 30-minute thing on like Daitoru and like, you know, like how they practice, blah, blah, blah. And in it, like one of the Daitoru guys said, the reason that you practice with somebody like grabbing you strongly is first and foremost, you're trying to train that particular skill. So you want somebody to grab you strongly. If somebody grabs you lightly, then there's kind of the question is then you don't even have to apply that skill. Although that in of itself is kind of a challenge. But like you said, Alex, then, it makes it more difficult, to repeat the experiment.
Sure, you're going to have a side to side component from that, just
Mm-hmm.
from that elbow position. So
Yep.
obviously that introduces another layer of complexity for managing those forces. Now, of those three attempts, which of the three did you guys think was the best one? Which of those three approaches?
Oh, the third one with the
Yeah.
pressure, absolutely. It
Yeah.
just
Pressure
pops
downwards.
out. Yeah.
Yep.
That is pretty much what I'm not gonna okay, it's not 100% that's what we do, but that's the kind of component that you want to be using. And you can see a clear difference on that first. This is why I like this intro a lot. I know he goes to the other ones later on, but the first three, that first three, yeah, you can clearly see that he has a hard time. He has a hard time for the first two tries, right? And then this one, it looks effortless. It's not effortless to him, but visually you can see that how effortless that looked to him, to us, right?
Well, one easy thing to notice between all three of them, or sorry, between the three, is that the first two, if you watch, his whole body goes forwards,
Yeah.
right? And it's far less pronounced on the third one than it was in the first two.
Mm-hmm.
Yet at the same time, it was the cleanest one of the three.
Because he wasn't going forward.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Kind of reminds me of a little bit of a video that you just did recently, Alex, or not that you did recently, but that we showed recently.
Oh, a decade is about fairly recent, right?
Well, if you want to call 11 years or whatever recent, but you know.
Yeah, so that one, it's very similar. It's we actually, I don't think in the video I don't really say it's a downward pressure or anything like that. It just, I just say, oh yeah, you just pull to push. But that's what happens if you try to pull someone, right? When you're pulling, you draw that person into you, right? That creates that automatic kind of pressure or flow downwards into the ground that sinks in, and that normal force wants to reverse that and come outwards, and that normal force is what pushes the person away from you. And to a degree, now it's not 100% clean in this video, so and that has nothing to do with Steve's skill or anything like that. It just might be just conditioning here that he's doing it, but you can see that happening as he's pressuring down. Is that nominal force that brings his arms up and his and the opponent coming up. You don't see that in any of the other two. What you see in the other two is him struggling to fight the force, right? There is none of that nominal, that normal force in action visually. I'm not saying it's happening or not. I can't tell until I'm actually touching him. But visually, it's fairly obvious that there's an actual force on force struggle in the first two, and then the third one, we don't see that as much. It's not as clear. That's why it looks so clean, right? Now he may be struggling internally, and I would be struggling. It's a lot of force, but visually it looks clean. It looks very easy. It looks relatively effortless, and that's what usually when someone's using the normal force, which is that the counter opposite force, that's what it looks like. So I mean, we can look at it real quick again. I mean, so with that in mind, if for folks who are watching with us, go back and now take a look, kind of look for those signs. You guys see them shaking, right, when he's fighting. This is that front, and you see that struggle. But a lot less on that third one.